Hey guys, Juni here, and welcome to my new player guide for Final Fantasy XIV. Today I'll be going over the things I wish I knew before I started playing, as well as things I feel would be useful nuggets of knowledge for anyone who is new to the game. Now, I'm going to try and keep things as clear and concise as possible, and there will be timestamps in the description, so if there's anything you specifically are looking for, you can hop to that section. However, I do recommend watching the entire video, as it definitely helps my channel. Speaking of which, if you liked my video, feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe. If you're interested in other guides that might be a little more in-depth on specific topics, you can check them out after this video. I have a retainer guide and also a Garland data guide. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get started. Picking your data center and server. The first step is to pick your data center. Your data center determines what servers you can make a character on. You can always make a new character on a different data center at a later time if you wish. Something to keep in mind is that data centers connect servers together. So if, let's say, your friends are on different servers but they're on the same data center, you can still interact with them by visiting their world. The main purpose of choosing your main server is to decide where you want to establish your roots. For example, what marketplace economy you want to participate in, and what server you want to have your residence, if you're interested in that sort of thing. If you have friends that play the game and you wish to play with them, I recommend confirming with them what data center they are on, then try to make a character on their server. If for some reason the server is full and you can't do that, try at different times of the day. Sometimes you can still get in since players are constantly leaving and joining new servers. Even if you can't be on their server, you can still play with them as long as they're on the same data center. If you're completely new and have no one to play with, just pick a data center that is appropriate to your in-real-life location. Choosing a class. I'm sure many of you are going to ask the question, what class should I play? That question alone would warrant an entirely separate video, so in the meantime, here are some general guidelines to help you out. You can only start the game as a few classes, but they eventually turn into jobs come level 30, and as you unlock content, you will have access to even more jobs. Generally speaking, tanks and healers have faster queue times on average, but it can vary based on your data center and the time of day that you play. Also keep in mind that if you're interested in participating in late game content, such as raiding, your party will consist of 2 tanks, 2 healers, and 4 DPS. If you're going to be playing with friends and are unsure of what to pick, it wouldn't hurt to ask them what they need and make your decision that way. The nice thing about the game is that you can play as every class or job on a single character, so if you change your mind later, it's no big deal. Leveling. Now that we got that out of the way, I'm going to go over some of the best practices and things I wish I knew from the beginning that would have made my life, and the life of many others, a lot easier had we known sooner. When leveling your first class, make sure to focus on doing the main story quests, or MSQ, first. Don't bother with the side quests on your first class unless you're trying to unlock some specific content or are participating in an event. The MSQ will give you plenty of experience to level and will also give you gear that you can equip as you level. This game is very story driven, so completing MSQ should be your first priority. I do not recommend purchasing anything from the MOG station that will allow you to skip story or skip levels for your first job. Doing so is a huge waste of the borderline free experience you get from the MSQ, and I personally do not feel that it is worth the money. Only after you catch up to everyone else in the story do I recommend buying a level boost for an alternative class if you so desire. As you complete the MSQ, you will start to unlock dungeons. Eventually, you will unlock enough dungeons to be able to queue up for roulettes. Every roulette gives out a daily bonus, so make sure to complete them daily if you can for the bonus experience and other goodies, depending on what rules are needed most. Another useful method of leveling is by utilizing the challenge log. You can unlock it by completing the level 15 quest, Rising to the Challenge. There are a plethora of rewards for completing the simple challenges within the log that can definitely add a boost to your XP for things you were most likely going to do anyway. There is also a sightseeing log that you can try and complete in between queues just to get a little bit of bonus XP. There are little glowy orbs where the different spots are, but you can only see them if you have unlocked the sightseeing log. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I recommend checking out the Final Fantasy XIV wiki for more information on the topic. Hall of Novice. The Hall of Novice provides an excellent tutorial for people who are trying to learn a new role. Whether you are tanking, healing, or DPSing, the Hall of Novice clearly outlines the responsibilities of your role. At the end, you get some gear, so it definitely doesn't hurt to check it out once you hit level 15 with at least one combat class. I'm going to show you their locations on the screen. While we're on the topic of jobs and classes, I just want to throw out a few tips to help you guys avoid doing things I see new players do all the time. Tips for tanks. Tanks have a tank stance. Yes, I know it sounds strange, but every tank job or class has a tank stance. Why? Because though in most cases like dungeons you're the only tank and you will have all the aggro, sometimes you will queue up for things that require more than one tank. Trials and raids are a good example of this. In about 90% of cases, you should face the enemies you are tanking away from your party members. You can tell if you have aggro, also known as enmity, by looking at the party list and the enemy list. The party list will show numbers in order of who has the highest aggro toward whatever enemy you happen to be targeting at the time. In this example, I am tanking, and I know I have the highest enmity because there is a letter A next to my job icon instead of a number. On the enemy list, the icon and color changes based on your aggro. A red square means you are tanking that enemy's damage output. A yellow triangle means you have some aggro, but not enough to get the target's focus. This can happen when someone else in your party is in their burst phase and doing higher damage than you, or when you haven't gotten a chance to use your enmity skills yet. A blue circle means that an enemy is in combat with you, but you don't yet have its attention because you haven't damaged it yet. I would like to mention that in instances where you have more than one tank, there is often a main tank and an off tank. Generally speaking, the main tank is the one who has the boss's aggro, and the off tank does not. Depending on the fight and certain mechanics, it is sometimes important for a tank swap to take place, where one tank passes the aggro of the boss to the other, and their roles and responsibilities are swapped. As an off tank who is taking aggro, you should turn on your tank stance and use Provoke, a role skill, to grab the boss and become the main tank. The main tank should use Shirk to pass the enmity they currently have to the other tank, and thus become the new off tank. The tank who passes aggro to the other should then turn off their tank stance. The last piece of terminology you should be aware of is the tank buster. This term is used to describe an ability, usually casted, by an enemy that will typically insta-kill anyone who is not the tank. Now let's move on to the healers. Tips for healers. For a lot of new healers, I see a common theme. They will wait for people to lose health and then heal them. That's it. Well, I have some news for you. You have damaging spells! I know, it's crazy, right? Well, I recommend weaving damaging spells in between healing spells. Starting off with this good habit will allow you to be more effective as a healer. Why? Because the less time the enemies are alive, the less damage they can do, and the less you have to heal. Not only is it more efficient, but it's also less boring than standing still waiting for something to happen. Keep in mind that while you're casting Area of Effect, or AoE, heals and buffs, you want to cast them at a mid-range from the enemies so that you can reach as many party members as possible. I just want to add in a quick side note for the Astrologian job. You have two stances, Nocturnal and Diurnal. Nocturnal is your shield stance, and Diurnal is your regen stance. Depending on who your co-healer is in a raid or trial, you should choose the opposite of what they have. So, for example, if you have a white mage as your co-healer, they have powerful regens, so you want to use your Nocturnal stance or shield stance. If you have a Scholar as your co-healer, you should use your Diurnal stance or regen stance, since they already have powerful shielding spells. If you have another Astro as your co-healer, you want to choose the opposite stance as them. You can ask them what they prefer to use, or just wait for them to pick one, then choose the other. Just remember, you can't change your mind once combat starts. My last general advice for healers would be to never stand near the tank. Some tank busters can hit more than one target, so standing too close can and will get you killed. Tips for Melee DPS. Like the healers, Melee DPS should never stand near the tank unless there is a specific reason to. I will get into some examples later in this video. Melee classes have positionals that are tied to their abilities. Not landing the skills in the right position can severely hinder your damage output. It is important to read your abilities beforehand to confirm what skills go where. Not doing so will create bad habits that will be difficult to break once you hit max level. Your goal as a Melee DPS is to do as much damage as possible with as little movement or interruptions as possible. This concept is commonly referred to as uptime. It's easy to develop tunnel vision while concentrating on positionals and uptime, but it's really important that you actively work against tunnel vision, mistakes, and surprise deaths. Ranged DPS and casters. Ranged magical and physical DPS commonly make the opposite mistake of their melee counterparts. Standing far away from the enemy might seem like a good idea, but sometimes it will be a detriment. If you're too far away from the healer, you can miss out on AoE heals and shields. If you're too far away from the tank, you can miss out on heals and shields as well. And lastly, if for some reason you have an enemy's aggro, you should run toward the tank instead of running away and trying to kite it. That way, they can grab it from you sooner, with very little movement, and it'll be easier for them to maintain aggro of the other enemies. Some bosses have attacks that require you to get close to them to avoid it. So if you're too far away, there's no way you will make it in time, even if you sprint. General combat tips. Another common term in FF14 is GCD and OGCD. They stand for Global Cooldown and Off Global Cooldown. GCD refers to spells or weapon skills that, when used, put many other abilities on cooldown at the same time. OGCD refers to abilities that do not share a recast timer with most other abilities and can be woven in between GCD abilities. I will demonstrate what this means on my Astro. Notice how when I shuffle my cards, most of my other abilities do not go on cooldown. Shuffling cards would count as OGCD. When I use Malefic 4, it causes most of my other spells to go on cooldown. This would be GCD. Every job has their own version of GCDs and OGCDs, but I just wanted to show an example to give you guys the tools to make that distinction on your own. Once you hit maximum level on your character, you should definitely check out some guides specific to your job so that you can fully understand how to optimize your kit, and it will help you be a better player overall. Make sure to use a practice dummy that is the same or lower level than you, otherwise the abilities will miss and will throw off your entire rotation. Limit Break, or LB, is an ability you share with your party. You can see the progress of your limit gauge on your screen. As you deal, take, and heal damage, your limit gauge will increase. In a light party with 4 or less players, you can generate up to 2 bars of LB. In a full party, you can generate up to 3 bars of LB. Take the time to read what LB will do for you, depending on what role you are playing. Some enemies cast abilities that are interruptible. You can tell by looking at the enemy's cast, and if it's flashing, you can interrupt it with a silencing ability. When an enemy casts an ability, the game takes a snapshot of where your character is at that very moment at the end of the cast. The game will determine whether or not you dodge the attack in this same moment. Once the bar disappears, it will be safe for you to jump back into the fight as a melee tank or DPS. An ability's visuals will go off right after the cast is finished, so don't be scared to jump in, since they won't hurt you. Here are some recurring battle mechanics that I see many players falling victim to. This is a stack marker. When you see this, you want to run toward the player who has it and stack on top of them. If you are the one with the stack marker, you want to move near the enemies so the melee DPS and tanks can stack with you without being out of range and missing out on uptime. These markers come in many different colors, but they all mean the same thing. Spread out and don't overlap the centers of the circles. Meteor markers show a spot where something will impact the ground, and if you're too close, it will be deadly. You want to be far away from this, unless you are purposely trying to trigger one of your abilities through advanced techniques. These tower markers are opposite from the other ones. You want to stand in the circle so you can intercept the incoming damage. Not having enough people in these markers when they go off will usually give your party vulnerabilities and debuffs. Whenever you see a massive meteor coming down from the sky, and it's not your black mage that's causing that, you want to stand behind a rock, otherwise it will instantly kill you. Whenever you see this eye icon, it means you should look away from it at the end of the cast. So if you happen to be still looking at it when the ability goes off, you're going to have a bad time. This purple tether usually comes from a boss and will turn a darker purple when you distance yourself from them. If your tether isn't dark purple, then you're going to take extra damage and even debuffs from the boss when the attack goes off. This chain will tether you to another party member, and you must separate from each other to avoid getting debuffs or taking damage from it. Alright guys, I know this video is getting kinda long, but I saved the best for last, so bear with me as I fly through this. Don't hesitate to pause the video or rewind if you need to. Take your time with cutscenes if you want to watch them. We understand. There is a boat you can take from Linza La Minza that will take you directly to the Waking Sands. This will save you so much time. Trust me. If you queued up for a dungeon trial or raid with your friends, and one of them disconnects, let the other party members know that you are queued with them and whether or not they are attempting to reconnect to the game. I've seen a couple of times where the offline player will get vote kicked from the party because other players had no idea they were on their way back to the game after waiting a few minutes. If you're on PS4, you might want to use a keyboard. FF14 is a very social game, so unless you plan on playing only with your friends over voice chat, you might want to get yourself a keyboard. Take the time to look through your settings. You might find options that you like, and there's also a few guides out there to help you navigate your settings and choose the options that are best for you. Adjust your HUD to what you feel is most comfortable. If you look at different players' screens, you can see a bunch of different arrangements. For example, I do battle content on controller, but craft on a PC setup. I swap back and forth constantly, even though I am playing on a computer. You can get your gear to look like something else by using glamour prisms. This allows you to have the gear that is optimal for your job, while also customizing your outfits to your heart's desire. I could go over the entirety of the glamour system in another video, but for now, just know this. When you hover over a piece of gear that has been glamored, you can see the name of the gear that it is mimicking. You also know if something has been glamored if there's a plus symbol in the upper left-hand corner of the piece of gear. If you open up your character menu, there is an option to optimize your gear using items in your armory chest. Grand companies are an excellent resource for players, especially when leveling crafters and gatherers. Company seals can be traded for various items that are pretty useful, so I recommend taking the time to look through it as you increase your rank within the Grand Company. Housing is very limited and expensive. As a new player, your best bet is to have a friend or FC that has a house so you can share in the benefits. Last but not least, don't be afraid to ask for help. Strangers, for the most part, are willing to help you, so if you get stuck on something, or lost or confused about something, don't be afraid to ask. We're here to help. The community is pretty friendly overall, and somewhat forgiving towards new players. As always guys, if you liked the video, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe using the bell icon to know when I post new content. Thanks for watching, Juni out. Oh yeah, did I mention I have an Etsy shop? You guys should totally check it out. I'll put it in the description below.